Well, New Hampshire and Massachusetts police conducting another search today for a 5-year-old girl who is believed to be dead.
It appears the search may be on the move. We just saw a contingent of state police vehicles head toward Lynn.
The little girl was just 5 years old when she was last seen in 2019, but it wasn't until 2 years later that she was reported missing. Harmony's remains have never been found.
Her father, Adam Montgomery, now facing second-degree murder charges in her death.
Governor Chris Sununu demanding answers as the search continues for 7-year-old Harmony Montgomery.
Clearly, the system failed somewhere along the line.
When you think of Massachusetts, you think of education, you think of healthcare. That's why I was surprised to find out that the state's child welfare system ranked among the worst in the country. My name is Brooke Lewittis, and for the past 18 months, first as a graduate journalism student at Boston University, and more recently for a new documentary film being produced by Peabody Award winner Bill Lichtenstein, I've been investigating the failed child protection, foster care, and juvenile court systems in Massachusetts and nationally. What I found at first was puzzling and then shocking.
Hi, how are you? It's okay. Just a lot of things have been going on. I floated from a whole bunch of different foster homes, and each of the foster homes, like either I got beaten or I got raped, or that they would put me into like their attic. You can stay there for a couple days. We'll come back for you later on. And then they would find like rat bites all over my body.
I started my career working in the Child Protective Services system. So I was responsible for investigating allegations of maltreatment and removing people's children.
In order to better understand the system, I reached out to leading experts in the field, including Alan Detlef, who was the dean of the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Houston. He explained that, surprisingly, the vast majority of children are not removed from their homes for abuse, but for neglect. Neglect most often involves issues related to poverty, such as not enough money for food, medicine, or housing.
You probably know this from your research, but most people don't realize that only 17% of children in foster care are in foster care because of physical or sexual abuse.
Right.
Most kids are in foster care because of neglect, and what the state calls neglect. When I was able to look back on the children that I removed, I could look back and in hindsight think most of those children didn't need to be removed.
I also learned in Massachusetts, children could be removed from their families without a court order or warrant, simply based on the judgment of a state social worker. Such was the case for Josh Saby and Sarah Perkins, who made national headlines after the State Department of Children and Families, or DCF, removed their children, ages 3 and 6 months, from their home.
We were just falling asleep. It's 1 a.m, and we hear a loud banging at the door. And we open the door, and they say, "You need to let us in. We're from the DCF, Department of Children and Families. You have to let us in." And then eventually we got our lawyer to talk to them, and our lawyer then calls us and says, "Listen, if you don't let them in, they're going to break down your door, and they're going to take your kids, and you'll probably get arrested in criminal charges. You have to let them in." I think I nursed Cal one more time so that he would have a full stomach. And then I rubbed Clarence's back, and I told him, "My boy, it's time to wake up. You are going to go on a car ride." "Clarence, you get to go on a car ride." And at that point, he started to scream. We tried to carry him out the door, and he grabbed the door jamb, trying to stay inside the house. Josh came out with Clarence, and he put Clarence in the car, and then they shut the door, and they drove away.
The Sabys were without their children for a full month, and it wasn't until a subsequent court hearing 4 months later that DCF stated that there were no concerns about the safety of the Saby children, and the case was closed.
Kids that are super homicidal, kids that are super suicidal, kids that keep abusing substances.
From speaking with dozens of families, I found that children can face unimaginable horrors in DCF custody, whether in foster homes or in state institutions. When Monet Agbertoko was 16 years old, her mother was too ill with COVID to pick her up from the hospital. While she made arrangements, a hospital staff member alerted DCF, and Monet spent the next 4 months in a state group home. Monet shared her experiences with her mother during their virtual visits.
They think helping me and meeting me halfway is bringing my mattress from my room and putting it on the floor in the TV room. Like, they do not care, and no one holds them accountable.
The maternal grandmother of the youngest boy involved in this horrific case called DCF a few months before 14-year-old David Almond was found unresponsive inside this home. Mary Lou Garcia lashing out at the Department of Children and Families.
Beyond the impact on children, families can also be devastated by their involvement with the state child welfare agency. Mary Lou Garcia was the step-grandmother of David Almond, who starved to death while in DCF's legal custody.
Children dying, children being abused in actual foster homes, and people are so afraid to speak. They don't have a voice. They don't have anyone to advocate for themselves. Who's going to advocate for these children with no voices?
One former foster child is now giving voice to children and families involved with DCF. Tatiana Rodriguez grew up as a foster child and later had her own son removed as a result of her having been a victim of domestic violence. In 2021, Tatiana started Family Matters First, a support and advocacy group for families involved with DCF. A central part of her advocacy is raising awareness of the disproportionate impact that the child welfare system has on low-income families and families of color.
17% of people and children that are removed from the home is due to violence or sexual violence. Other than that, they're removed due to so-called neglect for being poor. We see you looking, yes. Poverty is not a crime. Poverty is not a crime. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
This year, Massachusetts DCF will spend 90% of its $700 million service budget paying foster families and privately run institutions to care for kids who've been taken from their homes, while barely 10% of that is used to support and strengthen families to prevent the need to remove their children. Advocates like Alan Dettlaff see this as a national problem and say that the system is upside down.
I have a colleague on Twitter who just talked about a case where 4 children were separated from their mom because they were homeless. Those 4 children were then separated into 2 foster homes.
Yes, I saw this tweet.
Did you see that tweet?
Yes.
And spent $3,500 a month. Could you imagine what $3,500 a month could do for that mom? Mm-hmm. Notwithstanding the fact that if the state just provided her housing, it would probably cost half of that.
The public is largely unaware of the serious problems in the Massachusetts child protection system that have continued over the last 50 years, in part because everything that happens is unconditionally secret and impounded. For this film, we've gone into court and won several landmark decisions, giving the public and press an unprecedented look at the juvenile court system. These ongoing efforts, including seeking answers to what happened to 5-year-old Harmony Montgomery, are to bring sunlight into the dark corners of the child protection system in Massachusetts and nationally. Finally, we'll look at other states that have transformed their child welfare systems, as well as innovative programs that are working to help strengthen families while keeping kids safe.